At 75, I lost everything. But my legal revenge took it all back. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. The old man simply folded the eviction notice, placed it on the table, and whispered, "They really think I'm finished." But his revenge was already in motion. In this emotional, slow-burn revenge story, a 75-year-old man from Springfield, Ohio watches his world collapse when the two people he trusted most, his wife of 48 years and his only son, betray him ruthlessly. After discovering an affair and being tricked into signing away the home he built with his own hands, he faces eviction, shame, and homelessness. But the old man does not break. With silence, patience, and the power of the law, he rises from the ashes and destroys their scheme, legally, permanently, and with finality they never saw coming. 75 years on earth teaches a man something about betrayal, especially the quiet kind. The kind that grows like mold in a corner you never think to check. The kind that wears a smile while it rots your foundations. But Henry Whitlock never imagined it would come from his wife and only son. He had been married to Margaret for 48 years. They met at a church picnic, when he was a shy 27-year-old carpenter, and she was a bright-eyed nurse who smelled of lavender and ambition. Together they built a home, literally. Henry spent 3 summers hammering beams and placing stones with his own hands while Margaret baked pies to feed the neighbors who helped. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't shiny. But it was theirs. A house built from sweat, laughter, and late-night dreams. At least, that's what he thought. The first sign came quietly, a phone ringing at night. Margaret stepping outside to answer. Returning with excuses that didn't quite fit. "It's just the hospital. It's a co-worker needing advice." "It's nothing you need to worry about, Henry." But Henry was old, not stupid. One night, he woke at 1:43 a.m. to the sound of her laughter, soft, nervous, guilty, drifting through the hallway. He stood quietly in the dark as she whispered, "No, he's asleep." "Yes. I miss you too." Something in Henry's chest cracked, but he didn't move. Didn't confront. Not yet. Their son, Michael, came to dinner that week. Michael was their pride once, a smart, smiling boy who used to follow Henry around holding toy tools, pretending to help build furniture. But adulthood changed him. Or maybe greed did. Michael grew distant. Short-tempered. Always needing a little money until payday. Henry gave what he could, believing a father should help his son. But Margaret always gave more. Too much. Henry didn't understand why she enabled him so much, until later. During dinner, Margaret and Michael exchanged glances too often. Whispers. A strange tension filled the room. "Dad," Michael finally said, "I found a business opportunity, but I need a loan." Henry didn't even look up from his plate. "No." Margaret flinched. Michael scowled. But Henry knew something else was going on, he just didn't know what. A week later, Margaret approached Henry with a smile too wide to be real. "Henry, the bank needs us to renew the home insurance paperwork," she said. "You know, because of the roof repairs." She placed a set of documents in front of him. He didn't read them. His vision wasn't great in dim light, and he trusted her. He signed. When he lifted the pen, Margaret sighed with relief, not the grateful kind. The guilty kind. Henry felt it. A cold breeze through his ribs. 2 days later, Henry was in the laundry room when Margaret's phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up. "Can't wait until it's just you and me heavy black heart #R." Henry froze. R? He knew no one with R. Except Robert. Robert Miller. A man from her hospital days. A man she once described as too charming for his own good. A man who used to stop by their house years ago, until one day he stopped coming. Henry's hands trembled as he opened the message thread. Michael got him to sign the deed transfer. Once he's out, we can start fresh. Just stay calm. He's old. He won't fight. I love you, Maggie. Can't wait to make this our home. Henry felt the world tilt. The deed transfer. The papers he signed. He stumbled, gripping the washing machine to steady himself. They didn't just cheat. They stole his home. The home he built. The home he paid for. The home he bled for. His wife. His son. Together. A betrayal sharpened by greed. 3 days later, Henry woke to banging on the door. A sheriff handed him an envelope. Sir, you're being evicted. Henry read the notice. The property, legally transferred to Michael Whitlock, has been sold. You have 30 days to vacate. His heartbeat slowed. His breath cooled. His world burned. Margaret stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes cold. You'll be fine, Henry, she said flatly. Michael will help you find a place. Michael added, it's just time to move on, Dad. The house is too big for you. Henry looked at them, really looked, and finally understood. They didn't love him. Not anymore. Maybe not for years. But he didn't beg. Didn't scream. Didn't throw a punch. He simply nodded. All right. When Henry walked out the door that afternoon, carrying only a duffel bag and a framed photo of him and Margaret from 1978, they watched with smirks. Margaret whispered, he won't fight. Michael replied, of course not. He's old. Wrong? So very wrong. Out on the porch, Henry paused, took in a slow breath, and murmured to himself. They think this is the end. But this is the beginning. And with that, the old man walked away, quietly planning the legal storm that would strip them of everything. Henry spent the first night sleeping in his truck. It was humiliating. Cold. Lonely. But he needed that feeling. It fueled him. The next morning, he drove to the one place where he still felt safe, the old VFW hall. A place where nobody judged you for being broken. His friend Walter, an 82-year-old retired attorney, found him sitting alone with a cup of cheap coffee. You look like hell, Walter said. Henry quietly handed him the eviction notice, the text screenshots, and the papers he'd signed. Walter's eyebrows shot up. Then he smirked. Well, they made a mistake. Henry's heart flickered. What mistake? Walter leaned back. A legal one. A big one. Walter spent hours combing through the paperwork. Finally, he slapped the table. They forged your consent signature on page 2. The deed transfer isn't valid. Henry stared at him, breath caught. Can we prove it? He whispered. Oh yes, Walter chuckled. And that's not all. They also failed to follow Ohio's mandatory spousal notification laws for elderly homeowners. That alone is enough to void the sale. Henry's eyes welled. He wasn't helpless. He wasn't defeated. He wasn't done. For the next 2 weeks, Henry and Walter silently built a devastating legal case. Digital forensics proving the text messages. Witnesses who saw Margaret with Robert. Bank statements showing Michael transferred funds secretly. A handwriting expert confirming the forged signature. A copy of the original property deed with Henry's sole ownership. Violations of Ohio Revised Code Section 5302 regarding unauthorized deed transfers. Piece by piece, the betrayal became a weapon. A legal weapon. A final one. Henry filed a lawsuit quietly, without telling Margaret or Michael. A storm was forming. Cold, silent, and unstoppable. On the 29th day of eviction, Henry walked to the house one last time. Not to beg. Not to forgive. To see the battlefield. The curtains he hung himself were replaced. The family photos were gone. Margaret's car wasn't there. But Michael stood on the lawn, arms folded. "You're cutting it close, old man," he mocked. "You got your things?" Henry nodded calmly. "Most of them." Michael smirked. "Good. Mom and I have plans. It's better this way." Henry studied his son, the boy he raised, fed, clothed, protected. The bitterness on Michael's face. It wasn't new. It had been growing for years. Henry only said one thing. "I hope you're ready." Michael laughed. "For what? Poverty?" "No," Henry replied. "Justice." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" Henry didn't answer. He simply turned and walked away. 2 weeks later, Michael and Margaret were served. Their world snapped. Hard. Forgery. Fraud. Elder exploitation. Unlawful property transfer. Affair evidence. Financial misconduct. Civil damages. And a petition to reverse the property sale and restore ownership. Margaret fainted. Michael screamed. Robert vanished. But Henry sat on a park bench feeding birds, calm as winter. The revenge had begun. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors. Retirees. Former co-workers. People who heard whispers and came to see the truth. Margaret walked in first, trembling. Michael followed, jaw clenched, sweating. Henry entered last, slow, steady, calm, leaning on the cane that wasn't broken, but made him look more fragile than he really was. A strategy. When the judge entered, silence fell. Case 23 CV 948, the clerk announced. Whitlock versus Whitlock. Her attorney tried to argue. Mrs. Whitlock claims her husband fully understood the deed transfer. Walter rose slowly. Your Honor, Exhibit A. A massive printout of the forged signature appeared on the projector. Then the real signature. Side by side. The courtroom gasped. Margaret covered her mouth. Michael looked sick. Forensically analyzed, Walter continued, and confirmed fraudulent. Strike 1. Walter presented the text messages. The late-night calls. The intimate photos. Margaret sobbed. Robert didn't show up, he fled to Michigan that morning. Strike 2. Then came the bank records. Michael's withdrawals. The secret account. The money from selling Henry's antique tools, his prized collection. Michael stood up, shouting. That money was practically mine. The judge slammed the gavel. Sit down or I'll hold you in contempt. Michael Saturday. Shaking. Humiliated. Strike 3. Walter delivered the killing blow. Your Honor, Ohio law requires mandatory independent counseling for any deed transfer involving a homeowner over 65. This was intentionally bypassed. This wasn't ignorance. This was exploitation. The judge nodded grimly. This is one of the clearest cases I've ever seen. Margaret cried. Michael crumbled. The courtroom murmured loudly. After hours of review, the judge returned with a verdict. The deed transfer is hereby void. The sale of the property is nullified. Ownership is restored to Mr. Henry Whitlock. Damages totaling $480,000 are awarded to Mr. Whitlock for fraud, emotional distress, and elder exploitation. A restraining order is placed against both defendants. Gasps echoed. Margaret collapsed to her knees. Michael stared at the floor, pale. Henry stood still. Expressionless. Silent. The judge added. Mr. Whitlock, do you wish to add anything? Henry looked at his wife. His son. Two people who destroyed him. Then he spoke. Just this. Thank you, Your Honor. And he sat down. Margaret lost her nursing pension due to ethics violations. Michael faced criminal fraud charges. Their savings evaporated in legal fees. They lost their rental home, their cars, their comfort, and Henry's house. It legally reverted back to him, untouched. His revenge wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It was lawful. Precise. Final. But he still wasn't finished. After the trial, Henry returned to his home alone. He walked through each room slowly, touching the walls he once built, breathing in the dust, the memories, the ghosts. It was his again. But something inside him wasn't satisfied. Not yet. Because they weren't just punished. They were homeless. And guilt was a funny thing. Not guilt for them. No. Guilt for himself. For loving them too blindly. For failing to see the rot. But then he found something, a letter, taped underneath the kitchen sink. It was from Margaret. Dated 5 years earlier. Henry. I'm sorry. I never loved you the way you deserved. Michael and I always resented how much you worked. Robert makes me feel alive. I stayed because I needed stability, not love. One day, when you're gone, the house will finally be ours. Henry read it 3 times. Felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. He folded the letter, placed it in a folder, and whispered. This ends today. Henry filed one last motion. A petition to claim financial guardianship over Michael, who was drowning in debt and legally responsible for the fraudulent sale. Ohio law allowed it, and Henry had overwhelming evidence of Michael's financial incompetence. Within 2 weeks. Approved. Henry now controlled Michael's wages, his bank accounts, his assets, his payment plan for damages. In one stroke, Henry legally took control of his son's financial future. A future Michael had tried to destroy. Michael found Henry sitting on a park bench. You're ruining my life. Michael screamed. Henry didn't look at him. You ruined mine first. You're my father. Henry finally turned, eyes cold as winter. I was. Not anymore. Michael fell silent. Henry continued. You stole my home. You forged my name. You sided with the man sleeping with your mother. You expected me to roll over and die. Michael trembled. Tears streamed. I don't know why I did it, he whispered. Henry stood. I do, he replied. Greed. He walked away, leaving Michael collapsed in the grass, wailing for a father he no longer had. Margaret tried to call him. He never answered. She sent letters. Flowers. Apologies. He sent them back unopened. One afternoon, she appeared at his door, thinner, older, defeated. Henry. I'm sorry, she whispered. Henry looked at her with no hate, no anger, just emptiness. Go home, Margaret. I don't have one. Henry stepped back, closed the door gently, and locked it. Through the wood, he whispered. That was your choice. And he walked away. A year passed. Henry transformed the house. He fixed the porch. Polished the floors. Rebuilt the garden. Hung new curtains. He filled it with peace, the peace stolen from him. But he wasn't bitter. He wasn't angry. He was free. On his 76th birthday, he sat on the porch watching the sunrise. Walter joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "You did it, you know," Walter said. "Did what?" "You got justice, without breaking yourself." Henry smiled softly. "No, Walter. I didn't get justice." He sipped his coffee. "I got closure." Henry wrote one last message addressed to Margaret and Michael, but did not send it. The letter simply said, "I forgive you. But you will never be part of my life again." He placed it in his desk drawer. A reminder. A boundary. A tombstone for a relationship buried long ago. The neighborhood often saw Henry tending his roses, fixing a fence, or teaching local kids how to carve wood, his old passion. He smiled more. He slept better. He ate well. Because peace comes not from revenge, but from reclaiming what was stolen. And Henry reclaimed everything. Legally. Calmly. Finally. At 75, they thought I was weak. At 76, I proved them wrong.